and welcome. I'm Jessica from Coastal Carolina University, and we're excited to co-host today's webinar with our partners at Yellowdig, who are also hosting an in-person Human Connection Summit with us on our beautiful South Carolina campus in May. So excited for that, and we'll talk about that at the end as well. So today you're going to hear from 5 fantastic instructors, including some of our colleagues here at CCU. They'll be sharing how they're using Yellowdig to create engaging, connected online learning communities. We'll keep things practical with real examples that you can apply to your own course, followed by Q&A at the end. So feel free to drop questions in the chat as we go. And so we're going to go ahead and dive in and get things kicked off with a quick poll about your experience with learning engagement. So I'm going to turn it over to Brianna from Yellowdig to quickly go over our agenda and then launch the poll.
Thank you so much, Jessica. Can everyone hear me okay? Perfect. I'm super excited to kick off this webinar. As Jessica said, our panelists are amazing and we'll introduce them shortly. But first, we want to hear from everyone in the crowd. What aspect of engagement do you find most challenging or frustrating? So if everyone wouldn't mind scanning that QR code or going to slido.com and finding our poll, it should populate your answers here. So even panelists, feel free to hop in. I know you definitely have had some complaints, at least before Yellowdig, as to what was driving you crazy. So I'll give you some time to do that. And while you're thinking, I'll just tell you a little bit about the agenda today. So we'll start with this, and then it's really going to be a free-flowing conversation. We'll get to hear from the 5 panelists after they introduce themselves, and we have a couple questions prepared, but really want to make it what the audience is interested in. So we might include some of the problems you're talking about here. And of course, we want you to engage in the chat, and we'll be happy to answer questions from the chat. Our friend Taylor from Coastal Carolina will help to make sure nothing gets missed, and it's going to be a fun hour. So, all right, thank you for all these responses. I'm going to start trying to dig in. So we see consistent participation, getting students to actively engage, getting students to speak. Engaging students, that is a big challenge with engagement for sure. Definitely seeing that a lot. The monotony of online discussion boards for sure. Getting students to see the value of engagement, that is a hard one. Sometimes they aren't bought in and are just checking that box. Tech issues, yep. You can't engage if you can't connect, especially online, asynchronous. Sustaining deep interactive participation over time. All right, I know we haven't introduced our panelists yet, but would any of you like to hop in and speak to what you're seeing in these problems?
I think a lot of the roles that are being explained here are all of the experiences that I've had, and the reason why I decided to use Yellowdig was that engagement, trying to get students to communicate with one another. Getting some of that participation in an asynchronous class is very difficult, and so I think you guys are all in the right place for today's webinar.
Awesome. Thank you. And I would like to throw it over to Rachel. I know you had some thoughts around this problem and kind of how, I guess, transitioning to the topic of the webinar, like Heather did a little bit, how you've seen this addressed.
Thank you, Brianna. Hi, everyone. I'm Rachel Utwick-Diener, and I teach English at Grand Rapids Community College. I started using Yellowdig in an asynchronous literature class last year. And the reason why I chose it is that when I teach a literature class, it's heavily discussion-based. And so face-to-face students can expect to come into class, and sometimes I use dedicated discussion roles. Other times I just open up the floor and they go. But it's harder in a traditional Blackboard, and we've been using the Blackboard LMS, we're moving to Canvas. It's harder in a typical LMS, especially with how we train people to teach online with one post and 2 replies or whatever it is, right? It's harder to have authentic discussion. And so what I had to give up when I chose Yellowdig was the idea that I was going to ask a question or provide a prompt and everyone in the class was going to answer that, right? And I think we all know that usually leads to more of the same, right? And students have a difficult time responding to the same prompt that comes up time after time. And so in choosing Yellowdig and providing my students with the topics, that invites them to share what they have noticed or what they think is meaningful about the text week after week. And then students earn points by responding, right? And so it's a much more authentic discussion and much closer to what you get in a face-to-face classroom than using a traditional LMS discussion board.
Thank you so much, Rachel. That was a great way to frame our conversation. And I think you hinted at, we are going to have a quick, I forgot to say this in the agenda. Sorry, my head's all over the place today. A quick little, what is Yellowdig for those who don't know? And actually, I'd be curious, who here in attendance has used Yellowdig and is looking for maybe some fun ideas from our attendees of how they can use it more creatively, or who here is completely new, never heard of it, maybe not going to adopt, just looking for engagement, suggestion, ideas. So maybe if you've used Yellowdig before, put a I heart Yellowdig in the chat. And if you haven't used Yellowdig in the chat, maybe like a yellow dog, like what is Yellowdig in the chat, so we can scroll through and just get an idea of what your knowledge of Yellowdig is. For those of you who haven't heard of Yellowdig, our pedagogy is we're pretty we have a stance around what we think is important for having these online discussions. And as Rachel hinted at, this is kind of the old way. This is the typical one post, two comments, where the student, the instructor is telling everyone this is exactly what you need to do. You see people starting to procrastinate, and it's just a very truncated, and honestly, I'm sorry if you're still using this, boring type of conversation. And then what we see at Yellowdig is, instead of that, it's a more free-flowing conversation. You can connect topics throughout the weeks and have real conversations that aren't 100% instructor-led, and instead the students can come in and bring their ideas and connect everything. But I'm going to stop talking about that because I think the panelists will do a much better job later. So then, just to show you what this thing is that we're talking about, this is what Yellowdig looks like. It is a single scrolling feed, very similar to social media that students and instructors are used to interacting with. And the instructors can set what are called topic tags for the students to interact with. I think, Heather, you like talking about topic tags. I'm sorry to put you on the spot. Would you mind jumping in and sharing a little bit about topic tags?
Sure, absolutely. So in my course, I have guest speakers that come in throughout the course of the semester. And so I have topic tags that just literally have that person's name. And then I also use that to kind of guide the discussion as we go through the semester with each of the module topics. And then I leave the conversation up to students to pick. So they're allowed to use how many of our topic tags that they want to be able to spark ideas from others and help move that conversation. But also this gives them that guide to keep them connected to the conversation of the course. And it keeps them from getting too far astray from the content that we want them to focus on. But we're not sitting in that driver's seat steering that conversation with, I'm going to make this post and you have to respond to it. I let them make their decision as long as they collect that topic tag, and that helps connect that and gives them that brainstorming idea.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Heather. And as you can see, it's very multimedia driven. It's not just walls of text. And then I believe one of our other panelists was excited to highlight the data and what's available in the data part. So if anyone wants to come off mute and just say anything about that, otherwise I'll just be over here playing with the network graph. All right, I should have taken better notes. I don't remember who it was to put you actually in the hot seat. But this is our network graph. It's just a fun visual of what's going on in the community and how everyone can interact. And then there's lots of data that you can see. Like I said, this is intended to be a 30-second demo, so we're not going to dig into everything. But what I like showing is the community health. So it's kind of a really good quick snapshot of what's going on in your community, posts, comments, reactions, and then conversation ratio, which this is a demo community. It's pretty bad. We try to get to conversation ratios of upwards of 8, which is the ratio of comments to posts. So a typical discussion board would be around a 2, but we see actually I was just stalking one of your communities and it was 8 or 9. So they're actually going back and forth and having those real conversations. So with that, like I said, I did not want this to be a Yellowdig demo. Let's introduce our wonderful panelists. I'm going to just have you all introduce yourselves and let us know how you're using Yellowdig. So just for the sake of ease, I'm going to start with David, since you are in the top of my screen.
Thanks, Brianna. I'm Dave Peterson. I am a associate professor of finance at Rutgers Camden. I use Yellowdig in both my undergraduate and graduate courses. They're all taught asynchronously online, and I found that they foster fantastic engagement from the students, as the other panelists were saying.
All right, next on my screen is Rachel.
Hi, everyone. I'm Rachel Diener. I'm an associate professor of English at Grand Rapids Community College, and I use Yellowdig in my asynchronous literature courses.
Thank you, Rachel. Marissa, can you tell us about yourself?
Hi, I'm Marissa Terranova, and I'm a teaching associate at Coastal, and I teach for the music department, but since I'm adjunct, I pick up a couple of extra classes here and there. So I'm actually currently teaching an interdisciplinary studies course, which has students from all across the university, students I do not know, and they also do not know each other. So I felt like Yellowdig was the perfect application to use in that setting. To get them to talking to each other and talk to me. And so, yeah, that's how I use Yellowdig at Coastal.
Fantastic. Next up is Heather.
I am Heather Young from the University of Florida. I am an instructional assistant professor in the Department of Agricultural Education and Communication. I teach for the class that I use Yellowdig in anyway. I have 2 classes that I teach that are both high enrollment courses, but my oral communication class is the one that I specifically use Yellowdig in, and that has roughly 345 students between spring, summer, and fall semester. So this is a large application. We have online lectures, we have a mix of in-person and online labs. And so there are some students that never actually see me in person other than just on a computer screen. And same with some of their classmates. And so Yellowdig was a fantastic way to be able to incorporate that natural conversation without, like I shared before, not having to drive that conversation and let the students talk about what they want to talk about and at the rate that they do. So thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining. Next up is Dr. Fine.
Hi, Brianna. So I am the Associate Dean of Student Success here at Coastal Carolina University, and I'm also a professor of marketing. So I actually started using Yellowdig. We tried to figure out exactly when I started using it. I think it was 2020. So I actually learned from it at an AACSB, which is our accrediting body for business. And it was an online learning workshop or seminar is how I originally heard of it. So I was really struggling with the fact of it was during the pandemic. I couldn't see my students, and I'm all about engagement and getting them to do more throughout their time here at Coastal Carolina University. So it really bothered me that I oversee all of this engagement, but I can't tell them about it. So Yellowdig has really made it a way that they can also tell their classmates what they are engaged in. I think the best example I have recently is we have our basketball team, our women's basketball team has done really well this year. And one of the students, so I also make it a requirement because it's a marketing research class that has about 35 students. So they have to have some other type of research that goes into it. They can't just post text. It needs to have something that they've done. So this student actually was encouraging her classmates to come see her game, which is tonight, but also did all of this extra information about how, you know, all of the statistics of the team, and shared all these other links. And then it was so great to see all the students like, yay, we're so excited for you, you know, go Sean. So like, that's my best example recently, that they get to know each other, and it is a completely asynchronous class. So I love to see online students, because we have an online marketing program. So a lot of them never meet their classmates. So I love to see them engaging in ways. And then I jump in there every now and then, and it just feels good too.
I love that. That's such a fun example of your community. So I feel like you all may have touched on this a little, so no need to repeat yourself if you did in your intro, but I think it might be interesting for everyone to hear why you switched to Yellowdig, and what was your thought process there? What really prompted that change? For ease again, I'll start with David, since I know you have something to share there.
Yeah, so I've been using Yellowdig since spring 2023, around there. And that's not a coincidence that that's when I started using it, because that's when generative AI really hit the scene full scale with ChatGPT. And so I had been using the traditional discussion boards in the LMS, you know, again, as we've talked about, you know, post and to replies. Prior to ChatGPT and generative AI, there was some similarity in posts and a lot of repetition, but you would get some originality, you know, in there. But what I noticed was that when ChatGPT was launched, I was getting 100% participation, which was, you know, on the surface great, because we'd been maybe hovering around 80% before there. But 90% of those, that 100% looked very similar, and it was very bland. And so I got very bored reading through all of these posts, and I assume the students were getting very bored reading through all these posts. So I figured we had to find something new, and I came across Yellowdig, and I thought I would give it a shot. And as soon as I rolled out in the class, you know, completely changed, right? We had authentic engagement. We had, again, it's the agencies with the student, right? It's not, you know, I post, and you have to also have thick skin, because not everyone loves your posts. Sometimes my posts go uncommented, which is fine. But the students have that agency to post what they think is most relevant to them within the confines of the course, using the topic tags that Heather was talking about, which I think helped drive conversations. But it really revolutionized the engagement in my asynchronous courses, where we were having conversations that felt more like, and I'd say even better than sometimes the ones that we'd have in the classroom, because, you know, you always have students who don't always feel comfortable contributing in person. And I think in this platform, most people feel very comfortable sharing. So it just kind of revolutionized the engagement in my classes. And, you know, I've never looked back. And so every class that I teach, we use Yellowdig.
That's such a great story. I know AI is something that a lot of people are thinking about right now, and really just struggling with. So knowing that Yellowdig is an avenue to fix that is great. Is there anyone else who would like to share how they got started story?
I will. I kind of started how I got started, but I wanted to add in that when I was a chair previously, and the grading, David, of those discussion posts, just after I just didn't frankly have time to do it. So Yellowdig had very short startup time and cost to me personally, and then it saved me so much time during the semester, because it literally grades on its own, but you so I just sat back and kind of let it roll. And that's what I really needed. And that was the main reason why, as I became so busy and didn't have time, I'm only teaching a couple of courses, but I still wanted to make them engaging and not just, hey, I'm now an associate dean, I'm just going to make these classes where, students aren't going to know me or each other. I didn't want that, because that's what I also promote to all my faculty not to do. So I wanted an easy way to do that for myself. So.
Definitely. I think that speaks to who you are as a person, that you still cared about that, even though it was too much going on in your world. But I think that also speaks to a lot of people are scared to adopt technology because they think it's going to add time to their already busy workload. And I think other people may talk to this as well, but a lot of times Yellowdig actually saves you a lot of time because you don't have to read everything. But you actually, when you are spending time, you are having an impact, and it's actually interacting with the students instead of the boring grading. Fantastic. Anyone else?
I really took it to heart that an online asynchronous class should be very similar to a face-to-face class in terms of the learning experience. And so I feel like Yellowdig facilitates that much better than a traditional discussion board.
Fantastic. Thank you, Rachel. Unfortunately, my screen messed up and I lost my question list. But I do think that one of the great questions that I wanted to start out with towards the beginning was hearing any stories that you all have around your engagement in Yellowdig. And specifically, I think, Heather, you might have had a story that you were excited to share. So I'm going to throw it to you.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you want, you can bring up one of those screenshots that I had for the one student that it really was my aha moment that I had made the right choice to start using Yellowdig. And this particular student had shared about how she was one of those quiet students that really just didn't participate in class because she didn't feel like she had that voice. She didn't have that outgoing attitude per se, of where she felt like she could interject something and have it be of meaning. And so I think it was the one that's titled First Day or First Week of Labs. And so that student was in this one right here. She was in my specific lab that I taught, and she sat in the back corner where all of the typical quiet students filter to, is that back row. Try to not make eye contact with the professor because you might get called on. And so when I was checking Yellowdig after having our first week of labs, just to see what everybody was saying, this was not a required post. I did not ask them to comment about what they thought about their first week of lab. So this was completely on her own doing. And the fact that this conversation took off, you can see that there's a few comments here, but there's 20 other comments that are included in that one student's post. And so with having that high response, that boosted her confidence, and the fact that she shared, and then others below that also mentioned how they were in that same boat where they had those nerves that they just felt like they didn't want to speak up because they might say something wrong, or that this wasn't a place where they felt comfortable. And then once they got into that experience and understood how things were going and how this was a safe space to be able to learn and grow as a group, I think that really made a big difference for that student. And I saw those changes the next week in lab, where she was much more engaged in the conversation with just the people at her table alone, was drastically different than the very first week of labs. Do you want me to, while you're here, do you want me to talk about some of those other posts that students shared, Brianna? Okay, if you want to go to the ones with, so we'll talk about this watermelon speech one. So this was a really interesting one that was very last minute, throw it together, see what happens. A student had asked if they could practice their speech for the watermelon queen contest. And I said, absolutely. She was a student that did not take my class yet. She has not been she had no connection to me other than the fact that she just knew that I had been the professor that taught the speech class. And so I said, well, we actually are having lecture today. So do you want to jump into our Zoom meeting and give your speech to the whole class? It'll be a crash course. You'll see how your nerves and how you handle having 125 faces staring at you on Zoom. And she was a little mortified to start with, but she ended up sending me an email afterwards telling me how much she appreciated that experience. And so being able to get students to make that connection. So using this topic tag was one of those examples of one that was very broad of how do you see this connection? So getting them to connect that real life experience to the content that we're teaching in our classes is some of the hardest things that we do as an instructor. And so them being able to make those connections on their own was really fantastic to be able to see. And this post really generated conversation not only with what is a watermelon queen? Is this actually a real thing for those that are outside of Florida? You might not know, or outside of the Southeast area, you might not know that watermelon queen is like an industry advocate or a spokesperson. And so that was a conversation all on its own. And then going into the watermelon industry, we had some watermelon growers that were part of the class. And kind of like Marissa's classes, mine are open major. So anybody and everybody from all across the campus and university can take my class. And so most of the time they don't know each other in their class as part of their classmates or as their lab sections. There's another one that I have here that is with Dr. Bond. And sorry, I'm going all over the place, Anya. There should be two slides. There's one slide that has a video picture on it. And that was shortly after. So Dr. Bond is a student that she graduated with her PhD from UF, and she's also the public information officer for our Florida Forest Service. And she's a woman in a very male-dominated industry. So I thought that she would be a fantastic speaker on just that piece alone. But she's also really engaging, and she also takes that time to be able to stop and teach others and not just tell them, do it this way because this is the way that works. She goes into the explanation. So she used an example lecture that she would give, or a presentation that she would give to community members, and how she was incorporating those different presentation techniques as she was going through in the class. So the students got to see both sides of it really quick. If you go on to that next one that I have for Dr. Bond, there should be one more that has like a picture of a helicopter. No, it might not have made it in. So I have, so the students are allowed to be able to pull in any kind of information that they want on the specific topics. And what was really interesting was when they would go out and do their own research and bring that back to the group. So I don't ask them to do extra findings and pull in real life examples. But this one student took the advantage, and she went out and she was doing like a deep dive rabbit hole search of what the Florida Forest Service does, and had a video that she had included of, there we go, that's the one, where she had created a really big conversation based off of that, and how they had it really stemmed, not specifically in this post here, but a bunch of other people commented after that and made their own posts about how they were making connections of, oh, we saw this happening and now I know why they were doing that, or now I know why there's the plows that are putting the dirt strips around fields. And so having those conversations, and again being able to make that connection with how oral communication is used beyond the class, was just really beneficial. And I don't think this would have happened in a traditional discussion board because there wouldn't have been those additional prompts. So I'll let someone else share now.
I love that. And going back to the very first thing you shared about the shyer student getting engaged. And honestly, that was me as a college student. And I had a lot of in-person discussions that gave me a lot of anxiety. And I would sit there having great things to say and then wouldn't get my hand up in time. And then it would stink. But then one of my classes did actually switch to using Yellowdig that had that in-person discussion. And I actually got to know my peers, and I got to share things. And it was really great. So I'm a little biased now, but that was my experience. I saw you come off mute, David. Did you have something to add?
I just wanted to follow up on what Heather were talking about, how that Yellowdig provides an opportunity to enrich the learning experience for everyone by having students bring new learning materials into the course, right? We all try to bring current events in, articles that we think are relevant, but when you multiply a professor by 40, 50, 60 students in the class, it's just so much richer, the different practical examples that you find. And so I teach quantitative classes, right? So finance-based courses, but a lot of what we try to do is tie this to the real world so students can see the relevancy of what we're doing. And there's no better way when the students find the examples themselves because they're clearly more relevant to them. And then they share them with their peers, and it generates authentic conversations about what we're learning and how it's used. So, when we talk about time value of money, which I know is everyone's favorite topic, but we can talk about baseball, right? Because they talk about contracts and how the LA Dodgers are using all this deferred money now to pay Shohei and all these other players, right? And then they go find articles where journalists are actually using the same terms that we're talking about in the class to value these contracts, right, and compare them, right? And I think that it just kind of creates this very, like I keep saying it, but authentic conversation that students care about, and they engage so much more in the conversation. So I don't want to get lost that it does help, in terms of like learning objectives as well, in addition to the wonderful engagement that's going on.
Yeah, that's a great point, David. And I kind of want to broaden out the topic a little bit. I'm curious. So those authentic conversations are really, in essence, forming those human connections. And I'm curious, why is that important to you as an instructor? Why does that matter to you when you're thinking about your courses? Open to anyone.
I think being able to have that sense of community helps keep students motivated. So when the middle of the semester hits and everybody is bogged down and just ready to call it quits and walk away and not come back, I think having that group of people that you have now gotten to know, that you're not just a number in a class, really helps with that motivation piece. And so being able to have that sense of belonging really helps students in their success in the course, or at least how I've recognized it, especially having the virtual or asynchronous where you don't have that direct contact with students sitting in front of you.
I agree. Like the sense of community, I think is huge for online asynchronous students, right? Because they don't have that opportunity to chat before class or after class with each other for little things. One of the things that my first semester using it that just surprised me was the supportive community that developed within the class. So a student made a post about something on his student bill. He didn't understand there was something that he thought was wrong, and like 6 people jumped in and like helped him kind of understand I had no idea how to help. I could have probably found someone, but I didn't know. But before I could find someone, 6 students had already jumped in and pointed him in the right direction. And then it was just this, again, chance for there to be community there and support. And I think then you can just see that student then wanting to participate more because they feel part of something, right? And I have no data for this, but attrition's a big issue as well, right, with online students, right? But the more they feel part of the community, I would assume the more likely they're going to keep going when it gets hard, and they feel that support is there. So that supportive community is a wonderful benefit of Yellowdig.
Yeah, David, I like that. I just had another experience last week. There was I do a simulation in my class, and there are certain rounds of the simulation that are quite tough. And one of the students posted, this student had done it pretty early and had posted and said, has anyone else done that? I'm really struggling. There's some things. Does anyone have any tips? It was just really nice to see like the support that student got. And then of course he updates and was like, oh, I did the next round. We're good. Like we're back on track. So it was cool to see that.
I love how supportive Yellowdig communities are. Marissa, I saw you unmute. Do you have anything you'd like to add? Especially, I feel like around the interdisciplinary nature of your course, that could be interesting to hear.
Yeah, so I teach a course on influential women in music. And so most of the time people take my class because it satisfies a core requirement, but also like who doesn't listen to music? So it's fun for most of the students to join. But I'll say like I've had an experience like everybody has expressed so far in that, when somebody poses a question, like it's already answered and done before I even get to it. And that's really inspiring, and I love to see that. And I love when students find things like current events and social media posts that they throw up on there, like, what did you think about this? And a lot of times it's stuff that's like social media makes things happen so quickly and trends happen so quickly and then die so quickly that I don't even get a chance to really get there. And so the students are always bouncing back and forth with you know, thoughts and like analyzing what's happening in our world. And so I love that class is much more global when you use Yellowdig, because they have that outlet to like post content and not just words, but media and, you know, interviews, like links and polls and all sorts of things. So like for the first couple weeks of class when nobody knows each other and we barely have a community, Yellowdig really accelerates that process and helps us feel like a community real quick. And then I get to know them a little deeper as well. So it's nice for me as an instructor to get to know them. There are usually like 35 students in my class, which is a lot. I mean, it's not 300, but it's enough that I have to like really work on learning their names and where they're from. And so I think I love teaching a course that opens up my world and also does the same for them. So I've been really enjoying Yellowdig so far, and this is only my third semester maybe using it. And every year I find something new, discover another way I can utilize the platform. And I always get compliments from my students about how fun it is to use. So that's my 2 cents.
That was great. Thank you, Marissa. Awesome. I guess just moving on to the next question. Is there anything that Yellowdig has enabled you to do that you wouldn't otherwise be able to do? And I see David coming off mute. This one's for you to start out with.
Yeah, so you know, one of my roles at Rutgers Camden is as director of our financial planning program. This includes our online Masters of Financial Planning. It's an asynchronous online, it's an online master's program where the courses are primarily asynchronous. So we have a whole bunch of master's students who don't get to meet each other. Right. And especially in the field of financial planning, which is a very client-facing, people-based career, that's not ideal. We want them to be able to interact with each other. So I worked with Yellowdig to create a platform outside of the classroom. So it's a cohort-based system. So it's for all students who are part of the master's program, but that are not part necessarily of the same class at the same time. And it's a, you know, it's a wonderful way for us to engage as a community so we can celebrate each other's successes. We had one student win a big scholarship, so we could all celebrate her and talk about that. I can share events and resources, but there's a lot of ways to kind of maybe facilitate those type of things. One of the unique ways that we're using it is to host asynchronous guest speakers. Right, so we want to bring in industry professionals to talk to the students, but we have students from all over the country. And so it's hard to line up everybody's schedule to make sure it fits their time. And so what we do is we invite someone from industry in for a week as a guest member of our community. They come in and they, you know, make an initial post, maybe, you know, a little welcome video. They show their face, they say hi to everybody. And then throughout the week that they're with us, they can share resources, share questions, share passions, insights, whatever. And then the students can comment and can ask questions and they can engage on their own time, right? And so when I talk to when I ask someone to join us, you know, when we think about the time commitment, they spend about 5-10 minutes a day on Yellowdig. They plug in, right? And it's probably about equivalent to coming into a class and speaking as a guest speaker for one session, but they kind of spread it out over 7 days. And it's been wonderful, right? Because you get this engagement again where the students can ask the questions that are of interest to them. And those guest speakers can have those kind of, it's almost like a one-on-one conversation, which everyone gets to benefit from because you get to see what everyone's talking about, right? But I haven't found a way other than Yellowdig to kind of facilitate those type of conversations in this programmatic, you know, way. And I think it's wonderful. So I think that's something unique that I've been able to do with Yellowdig that I wasn't able to do before.
I will just add to that a little bit different, but I use accolades a lot, and it's something that in the old system, first of all, the forum, you know, post and then respond twice. Normally, most of my students that probably needed that interaction were doing it very last minute. And so with Yellowdig, it doesn't have due dates. And so I feel like it's more organic and students are just getting on there at all different times. So it's not just Sunday right before the deadline. And then the buffer point system has helped a lot. But the accolades is where I can show students like, wow, that was a really thoughtful post, or you used a scholarly article, not just some random article from whatever website, but you actually found a scholarly article on marketing. Wonderful. So, and then if they have like a video or image, we had a student in our class that just had a baby. So it's sharing little pictures of baby Vera and the support she got from the class. So accolades has been a big one. And then also pinning posts. So at the top, a lot of times if it's like career fair week, or we just had Wall Connections, which is we bring big speakers back, and the whole day we spend on bringing alums and speakers, and the students should be attending most of these. So I basically pin that at the beginning. So anyone that logs in for 2 weeks is going to see that. So that has been really great. And polling students, I know that there was someone in the chat, I think, that had asked about like, how can you get like a temperature check of your students? I do that a lot. You know, how are things going? You know, interim grades were just posted. How are you all feeling? Or if something, we've had a lot of weird things going on that aren't good on our campus this year. So been checking in to just see how they're doing too. And so polling students is another one that I really love that Yellowdig has.
Yeah, and I personally love having those topics that maybe aren't directly related to your course, but are human and people need to talk about if you're not able to interact with other people in your campus or whatnot. Like having that space is really great. We recommend like water cooler or like green or whatever you want to call it that lets them have that. And you can even set it to no points if you don't want that being something that they're earning points for as well. So thank you for highlighting that. Awesome. I would love to throw it over. Actually, I'm going to throw it right back to you. You've been a longtime user, Monica. So is there anything that you can share from using Yellowdig for a while that you've noticed, and also what it's like to work with Yellowdig and what's changed? Maybe if we have some people who haven't looked at Yellowdig since 2020 or something like that.
So I think the biggest example that I have would be on the support side of Yellowdig. So, and Jessica from Coastal probably knows when we switched our Moodle systems, but when we did that, we had a big issue with Yellowdig and the points coming back. And the support I got from Yellowdig, it was an immediate like jump on a Zoom call, we'll figure this out, with our IT guy from Coastal, and I think like multiple people from Yellowdig. And it's something that, you know, I've worked with a lot of publishers, and I don't get that. It's okay, a couple weeks later, now your points, I want students to know when they go into we use Moodle, Blackboard, Canvas. So I want them to know exactly where they stand in the class. So it was just an immediate reaction from your support team at Yellowdig, and that has really made it so I don't think I'll ever get rid of Yellowdig, you know? So having that experience really made me appreciate the love that all of you working there have, and literally dropping everything if we do have a big issue or if we just have any questions. So I've been so appreciative of that support.
Well, thank you so much. That means a lot to us. We do invest a lot in our support and success functions. So that's great to hear that we don't just think we're doing great with it, that it's translating to. But we don't want this to be just an entirely rosy, yay, Yellowdig's amazing. We want this to be a real conversation. So Heather, would you mind sharing a little bit about challenges that you've had?
Yeah, so unfortunately, I was one of those that was very skeptical to start with. Like, how much time is this going to take to get started? What am I going to have to invest in this before I figure out whether it's actually going to work or not? So that really quickly working with Deborah was fantastic, because she made it very simple. And within a couple of hours, we had it taken care of, and it was all ready to go for the semester. So it was an unnecessary challenge that I was giving myself. And so just not having that be a barrier is one thing that I can give you for some advice. If you take anything out of this, is just give it a try. You're not making a huge investment by trying it. But one of the challenges that I had in the first semester that I used Yellowdig was getting students to post on their own. You would not think that that should be something that would be the biggest barrier that I had. And I guess if that is our biggest barrier, then it's not that bad. But I had the hardest time getting students to just post what they were thinking about because they've been so trained to post on the related topic, or me telling you what the topic is for this semester or for this week for this discussion. And so once students got over that, by week 3, week 4 probably would be when they got the hang of it. And I started using the term academic Facebook to describe to them what Yellowdig is. And that's like all the light bulbs just started going off that, oh my gosh, this makes so much sense. And it seemed like they caught on a lot faster with how to use Yellowdig when I explained it in that context versus how I was originally explaining when I was first figuring it out on my own. So being able to figure out the benefits of Yellowdig before you introduce it to your students is probably going to be beneficial. Looking at it hindsight, if I had known how to use it a little bit more before introducing it and throwing the students in and me learning right along with them, it probably would have not been as much of a challenge. But if, like I said, if that is the biggest challenge that we all have to deal with, then it's really not that bad.
I wanted to add just one thing to my previous comment too, sort of what Heather was talking about as well. So the other thing, I think I did one of these webinars possibly a couple years ago, and I think at that we talked about doing a mobile app. And now that you have that mobile app, and that shows a lot about your company, you listen to us, you listen to what we need. And, so now when I'm on my morning walks, I'm literally on the app, and that's a quick way for me to still stay engaged. I can, if they've posted a video, I can literally just be walking with my cell phone, and I can, just like it's academic Facebook, like exactly what Heather said. So I've really enjoyed the app function too. And I think that the students have really liked that part of it too.
I would agree too. I think that coming from traditional discussion boards, that's all the students have known. That's the challenge is the, the number of times I said, what would you like me to post? Or like, what do you want me to respond to? and trying to get them to understand that agency that they now have. I think that takes, but the ball gets rolling, they learn, and then it goes forward. And I think what Monica talked about before, using accolades is another great way to do that. That, the accolades give them some extra points, right? So we're not, like I said, we're not actively grading all the time. The system helps grade a lot of it, but we can award extra points for special contributions or what have you. And one thing is, an early bird accolade, right? So if they're posting early in the week, maybe they get a couple extra points for getting the ball rolling that week. And then that kind of incentivizes others. Like, oh, well, if I post on a Tuesday instead of waiting till a Sunday or what have you, then I get a couple extra points, right? And then that just starts going. And I feel by week 3 or 4, even for those classes that have never used it, people understand how it works and they kind of get going with it. And we always start week 1. I'm sure a lot of people do with like introductions, right? Where people post a video and they respond to each other, and that gets the functionality part out of the way, and they're really easy with that. It's really that motivation to be the one to lead the conversations. But like I said, I think that just, it very quickly happens, and students really enjoy the ability to kind of lead the discussions.
That reminds me of something that I believe I've heard Rachel say, that you've said that your discussions are blowing up. Can you elaborate on that a little bit and share some more about your communities?
Well, my class has 24 students in it. And every time I log in, like after a Wednesday, right? Monday and Tuesday, there's maybe not that much that's new. But by Wednesday and Thursday, like I can't read all of it. There's so much. And it's not just people trying to do their initial post with their ideas on our new reading for the week, but they're responding to one another. And I'm so excited for them. They're delighted because they have agency, they're really engaged with one another. And, that's the stuff. They're not going to learn as much if I'm just, say, lecturing, which I'm not doing, right? Than as they can if they're in conversation with one another. And that's really happening in this class. And to what other folks have said, I think it was David just said about using the accolades. I always make sure to give early bird accolades. And when people, I use community builder a lot. I use thoughtful response, I think is one. Those are my main accolades. But even when I'm not using accolades, I'll go in and just sort of like give some encouragement and praise on the quality of a response. And you can see other students picking up on that.
Definitely. I love that use of accolades to help kind of form what you want people doing so that it just snowballs and posts keep getting better and better. I think that's a really great use of instructor time. And I guess speaking of instructor presence, essentially is what you were talking about there. What matters to you as an instructor? Like clearly you all you're good teachers and you care about creating community and having those conversations. But I feel like if that was the only thing Yellowdig did, you may not love it still. Like what is good for you as an instructor? Sorry, I worded that kind of weirdly, but why do you like Yellowdig for your role? I feel like Rachel, you actually gave a really, really short and concise answer to that before. So I'd love to hear your quick 2 cents there.
I mean, what I'm really looking for is a high quality and meaningful learning experience for the students. And I knew that I was not getting that from Blackboard discussion board. And I knew that in an online asynchronous class, students needed to interact and they needed to be part of a community, especially asynchronous students. Sometimes they're very disconnected from other people at the college. And Yellowdig really, it's not just a community builder, but it's a way for students to test out their ideas, get feedback from one another, sometimes get a little bit of pushback. Like they're learning. So I really enjoy it and I value it in my online asynchronous classes.
Does anyone have anything they want to add about benefits for instructor?
I can throw in my experience with using the network graph as part of our tool library that we can access, or resources that we can access with how the communication network is working. So you can see those outliers that haven't really had a lot of interaction. And so with a class size like mine, it's a little more difficult than, I mean, even having 25 people, if you have a really booming community, then it could be difficult to keep track of how many times you saw someone comment or post or whatnot. So with 125, it's even more complicated and even bigger classes than what I teach. So being able to just quickly look at that graph and see those folks that are sticking around the outside of that circle really makes it easy for me to be able to reach out and say, hey, just wanted to check in and see how you're doing. I know we're at this point in this semester, blah, blah, blah. Make that personal communication effort with the students, and having a large class makes all of the difference. Not selfishly just in our teaching evaluations at the end of the semester, like, hey, this professor actually cares about us, but just that good human being sense of making sure that all of our students are doing well. And doing that pulse check on your community, seeing how things are going. The community dashboard where we have the points for like your communication ratio or your conversation ratio, and all of that is just a good way to be able to monitor week to week, like, okay, so we started off really high and now we've nosedived. What happened, or what's the topic, or do we have a break, or is the schedule for points different this week? So all of those tools are really easy ways to be able to get a quick overview of how your group is doing or how your students are doing, without having to spend a lot of extra time. And so that was one of my big things with the other class that I teach is 250 students, completely asynchronous. And so I have like almost 700 students that I'm working with every year. And so being able to keep track of conversations in both classes and keep up with emails and everything has been really helpful to be able to have those quick pieces. And then the other part that I think is really helpful on the instructor side is using those topic tags, the non-point bearing ones. I have one for question and answers, or do you have this burning question? Or we have some fun ones where what you've been watching. So I don't even use grammatically correct statements, and it catches students. It's just like, I think it's so cool that she doesn't care. So being able to use some of those connector pieces really helps build that community that I think a lot of us value, and is just a natural thing that happens with using Yellowdig. So the combination of those tools, I think, makes this.
That's great. Thank you so much, Heather. I think, Caroline, I saw your question in the chat, and I think Heather did a good job answering that. But if you want any more information, we can definitely follow up and make sure we dig more into best practices for large courses. We are getting close to the end of the hour, so I think it'd be fun to do our last lightning round and hear from everybody one more time. The question that we were thinking for the lightning round is, what is one thing you wish you knew before starting to use Yellowdig? But to make it a little bit more open-ended, I'll also say if there's anything else lingering that you wanted to say and didn't get a chance to say, now is your time. So please use that. And panels have rearranged, so I'm going to do it. Rachel, you are first in the hot seat.
I wish I knew how easy it is to use from the instructor perspective and the student perspective. When I was preparing for this webinar, I asked students, what are your experiences with Yellowdig? And one of the first comments I got was from a student who's 37, and she said, I was not excited to learn to use new technology, but it's really been very seamless. And so I'm just glad that I took the risk to try it.
Thank you, Rachel. Marissa, you're next.
I'll say one thing that's really nice is that Yellowdig has like set up the class for you. Like basically when you start your course, like the point system is a recommendation, like how you set up topics is recommended, like the first post is is already a template. So like it's so easy to get started, and like the students don't know that you use that point system that was already provided for you, or that you use that template to introduce yourself. So it's a really like time-saving tool that Yellowdig support has already provided for instructors, which I was so appreciative of, because then I really didn't have to like study it too much before actually implementing it. So like the point system is already set up in a really awesome way so that students are rewarded for continuing conversations, and that's the way to keep students engaged, is to keep talking. And so I really appreciated that from the Yellowdig admin to create such an easy setup process.
You, Heather.
It's kind of echoing both of what Marissa and Rachel have just shared. If I had known that in a matter of a couple of hours, I would have been all set and ready to go. I probably would not have dragged my feet as long as I did before I finally said, yeah, let's have a meeting, let's talk about it. And then the other side of just everything being already set up, that you don't have to figure out how many points should I award them for making their post, or how many points should I give them for posting a video instead of just a verbal or a written response. And so knowing that now would definitely have been a really big selling point ahead of time. And then the only other thing that I think was something that was really special was just being able to have those conversations with students, and being able to do those introduction posts as your starting point for your semester. Not only gets them, like David mentioned, lets them learn how to use the tool and the program, the platform, but they're building their community, they're making their connections. And to Marissa's point with having that introduction post or that sample post already created, I posted that and I almost had a panic attack when I opened Yellowdig 2 days later, because I had over 100 posts already. And I was like, holy moly, what have I gotten myself into? Because I cannot keep up with all of this. And that's the other benefit with this program, is that you don't have to read everything. Like Rachel had mentioned, is you can go through and you can scan the community, see what's there, post here or there, or comment here and there, and the conversation flows all on its own. So just the fact that you can set it and forget it almost is a fantastic aspect of it.
Thank you, Heather. Monica?
I would just, I guess, echo all of you and say, kind of just do it. Just, I mean, of course, I love that Jessica and the Office of Teaching and Learning has supported us in that. There was actually a time that we got rid of that support for Yellowdig. And actually, I think Yellowdig, you guys worked with me to make that affordable through our First Day Complete for our students. So again, like just going back all the years that we've used Yellowdig, and the relationship and really working with us has been helpful. On the instructor side, what I used to do before you had the mobile app was actually put in my calendar 20 minutes, every couple days, just to make sure that I was in there doing, being engaged with the students. Now it's been easier because I do like to go on walks. So I actually just have the mobile app now, and I can do it a lot easier from my phone. So I know that the student side, it has to be a lot easier for them as well. So that's been very helpful.
I love the walking and yellow digging. My only fear is that if you tell too many people to do that, we don't want anyone getting hit by a car walking into the street. So be careful if you're walking and yellow digging. Last but oh no, we lost David. So I guess we are ready to wrap. I am happy to hand it back over to Jessica, but before I do, want to say thank you all for being such amazing panelists. And Yellowdig users and people who just genuinely care about human connection and supporting students. Thank you. We really appreciate all that you do. I see a question in the chat. Yes, Yellowdig does connect with LMSs, but we will follow up after, and throwing it back over to Jessica.
Thanks, Brianna. Thank you everyone so much. Thank you to the panelists. We appreciate you taking the time to join us today. Brianna, thank you to you and your team for putting this together and collaborating with us. This has been fantastic. I am a huge fan of Yellowdig, so I love promoting it to our campuses and other campuses. So thank you everyone for joining us. I know we're a minute over time, but really quick before we wrap up, I want to personally invite all of you to join us here at Coastal Carolina University for the upcoming Human Connection Summit. It's a one-of-a-kind event where educators come, leaders, innovators, they all come together to share stories, build relationships, explore how we can all just keep human connection at the heart of learning, even as technology, especially AI, continues to evolve. Following the success of last year's Human Connection Summit gatherings that Yellowdig hosted with Embry-Riddle and Drexel, we're excited to keep the momentum going at Coastal Carolina. So mark your calendars for March 28th and 29th and come be a part of the great conversations that we're going to have. Mark Milliron, I think is how you say it, the president of National University, who is a fantastic speaker, will be our keynote. So we're super excited about that. And there will be lots of engaging sessions hosted by faculty who are experienced with fostering that human connection. So there'll be lots to learn, whether you're using Yellowdig or you're not using it or have plans to. So we hope to see you all there. Brianna will be sending out some information, I'm assuming, to everybody that's on here. So look for that to come. And we hope to see you at CCU in May. Thank you, everyone.